Hello and welcome back. I am Dr. Dan Franz here with my good friend Rabbi B, Daniel A. Franz, and Rabbi Baruch Halevi. We are here as part of the Meaning Project podcast and the Defiant Spirit podcast, coming together to form the dynamic duo of Dr. D and Rabbi B. All kinds of great stuff going on today, but also some difficult suffering in the world. So we wanted to share a little bit about what we're up to. B, how you been? What have you been doing lately to share some meaning in the world?
Hey, brother Dan. I always feel like I should bust out in a rap, Dr. D, Rabbi B. So, but haircuts in our rap, I think we'll lose a lot of followers.
I think I'm gonna go ahead. For those watching, this is kind of a
it's a throwback
West Coast shirt going on.
West Coast. So it's a tough time in the world right now. The fear is, you can just feel it. It's palpable. And so one of the ways that I'm dealing with that, both personally and professionally, is turning to our previous podcasts of the Enneagram. You talked about MBTI, I talked about Enneagram, and I've been using it with clients. I'm creating some programs around it because I like the idea that, the way you experience fear and the way I experience fear as an Enneagram 1 for you and an 8 for me are different. And so really looking at how can I start to utilize this ancient system, bring it to a modern application, and really see people's, from our teacher, Dr. Frankel, really see people as individuals. Because we take something like fear, and there's just not one type of fear. Every person's going to experience it in a different way. And so I'm just really working right now on putting together programs that honor and recognize people's individuality. So
beautiful. Yeah, I've been watching along social media as you are constructing your Enneagram project and program, and I think I would encourage people out there to continue to look to that and to see what comes of it. I'm very excited for that. As for me, I do my weekly clinical hours, but then also I am actively teaching. I've got quite a few students in the Graduate Theological Foundation's Rebuilding a Meaningful Marriage course, and I've been teaching that for a few years now, and there's been a steady uptick. What I love about GTF, right, one-to-one, both you and I did some studying there. The one-to-one student to teacher ratio is beautiful. I know I enjoyed that, working with some greats in our field, and now to be a part of that and working with quite a few clergy on how to best help couples rebuilding their marriage. And then also I'm doing some work with the Viktor Frankl Institute of America. You and I know Alex Vesely, Viktor Frankl's grandson, and some of the other people that are working there, and just kind of chatting with them about how to best optimize their work. But then also, as you and I talk, more people need to know about this, not just academics. And we've seen plenty of academic organizations out there meant to create or inform or educate logotherapists. But we're talking about how to bring the message you and I share to more people.
That's right. It's such a needed message and relevant, and yet it hasn't had the scale as some of the other schools of psychotherapy. I should have mentioned, my program is called the Defiant Spirit Enneagram, taken from Dr. Frankel's work around the Defiant Spirit. And the first half of it is all Frankel, logotherapy. How do you merge these two things? But I think that, one of the great things about logotherapy and the work of Frankel is it's a great add-on to any system, whether it's a religious system, whether it's psychotherapy, whether it's business, whether, it doesn't matter, personality assessments. That's why one of the reasons why I love it, and I love our conversations and this work, is because it's so complementary. It's not exclusionary.
Mm-hmm. Remind me, B, did I come up with this, or is this from surely it's from Dr. Frankel's work, because I could not come up with anything this wonderfully creative. But I believe I remember reading him say it is a perfect adjunct to many psychotherapies. And from what you and I said, like, we even took it deeper. I think I wrote in the description of our last podcast, we talked a little bit about logo philosophy, right? Logotherapy is a therapy and a treatment, but we've talked about it being a way of living, kind of a philosophical guideline to pursue meaning and to lead your life, especially in these difficult times right now.
Well, I guess that's a good segue into our conversation today. We, for our viewers, we talk about it at the end of every podcast what's going to kind of happen next week. And then during the week, Dr. Dan and I go back and forth, communicating about it and kind of refined it down to a moment from Man's Search for Meaning. If you haven't read it, you need to read it. One of the most important books ever. And that's not just me saying it. As we know, as the Library of Congress says, one of the top 10 most important books of the 20th century. So get out there and read it. And if you do, or if you remember, there's lots of moments. There's a moment in there, though, he says something quite profound. And he says, I'm going to quote the first part, and then I'm going to paraphrase it because it's a little long. Let me recall that which was perhaps the deepest experience I had in the concentration camp. So he sets it up pretty provocatively. And he goes on to talk about, now I'm summarizing, Dr. Frankl, had invented logotherapy, created logotherapy, conceived of it prior to the Holocaust, and written a lot around it. After he had lost almost everything, lost his wife, lost his unborn child, lost his parents, lost his brother, lost his profession, lost his community, but stripped of it all. He had one last possession, if you will, and that was a manuscript, and he had hidden it in one of his coats. The Jews, tried to take as much they could with them, hiding it as best they could, and that was like his pride and joy. It was his North Star in many ways, I think, during that time. At least that's how he describes it in the book. And they took that from him too. It was sewn into the lining of his jacket, and they took that, replaced it, and he was devastated. I mean, he was devastated by all those things, but this, I think, symbolically was his last touch upon humanity, his humanity, and they took that too. And they replaced it with another dead prisoner's jacket. And he reached into the jacket pocket and he found a piece of paper. And on it was from a prayer book, a Siddur in Hebrew, Jewish prayer book. And on it was what's called the Shema Israel, which is the most central tenet or prayer in Judaism. Comes from Deuteronomy, and it says, Shema Israel, listen, Israel, the Lord is one. And basically what he said from that was, and when he reached into his pocket, he found, in some ways, he said he found a blessing. And the blessing was literally on this piece of paper, not just the words, but a charge for him to live his text, not just write the text. And there was just this profound moment in the book for me when I realized this was a man who was committed to living this idea, which, Dan, was what you're talking about. It's not a therapy nearly as much as a way of being in the world. And the blessing in that pocket for him. And we thought today maybe we could talk a little bit, expanding on that idea, blessings in our pockets. What are those fragments that we might not have seen as a blessing, right? And in the tragedy, when the whole world has gone dark, can we find what the Kabbalists, the mystics, call sparks in the dark, or blessings in the pocket? Is that a good setup?
Jotting notes down here, that was so ripe with the logotherapeutic fruit in there, right? I mean, to think he lost everything and then lost the one remaining thing that tethered him to his past, to his beliefs, to his life, to his work, right? To have not just everything taken from him, but then in the end, his only last real tether. And then to make the choice, right? He made the choice day in and day out, as you said, to try to live his philosophy that he had been teaching so many other people before, years before that. And it just occurred to me, I mean, as we've said, it's not just a therapy, but it's a way of being. And if more of us adopted that as a way of being, of seeking and discovering meaning, would we be in a world that needed less therapy? It's just something to throw out there. If we engaged in seeking meaning more and in making these kinds of responsible choices, the ability to respond, as he says, would we need less therapy for anxiety, depression, all these different kinds of things? I'd like to think so. And that's what I use a lot in my therapy.
So I want to credit my client of mine, Nancy, who came up with this idea of blessing the pocket. Thank you, Nancy, for a beautiful idea. And it's an image. I like, Dr. Frankl was also very good at, he used a lot of metaphors and a lot of imagery, because it was Maya Angelou who said, you forget what people say, but you don't forget, how they made you feel, or something like that. And I think this image of a blessing in a pocket right? It's just so palpable. I can see, that Holocaust imagery and just a dirty, worn jacket, and yet he's putting his hand in there, finding a gem, finding a spark, a point of hope. And when I counsel people, especially through grief, Dan, you've had this experience too, everything stripped from them. I mean, this is when Frankl is absolutely right on. We all have our personal concentration camps, even if we haven't gone through the Holocaust. And that might strike some as almost blasphemous, right? To say you've gone through a Holocaust. To diminish, it's not to diminish those who did go through the Holocaust, but Frankl meant that when you're going through the death of a loved one, as an example, you might as well be in the Holocaust because your world has been shattered. You've been reduced. We've talked a lot about reduced, and it feels like you have nothing, right? Can you put your hand in the pocket, so to speak, and hold on to one thing, one memory, one hope, one aspiration, one spark, right? This blessing in the pocket, so powerful, so necessary.
Well, and I think it's important to kind of extend that story to look at, here he was walking in there thinking his everything, right? The ideas he had worked on for a decade, years prior to that he had put to work and had been using, that he knew he needed to share with the world. He had that was his everything, and it was taken from him in exchange for something else, for something he found as a blessing. And I think so many of us need to take a look at that when we are facing adversity, when we are facing difficult times, when we feel everything has been taken from us, there is a blessing out there, whether it's accidentally found or we challenge ourselves to go find it. We can take suffering and turn it into achievement.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful idea. And then somewhere else in the book, I think we talked about this before, he said, I don't think it was in this, I didn't write down the whole passage, maybe you'll tell me if it is, that he was being challenged by the universe, essentially, to live it, not just to preach it. And there's such an important distinction. We have these great ideas, and it's theory until life presents us the curriculum. Life presents us the test. Life presents us the opportunity to live these ideas. And sometimes it's easy to say, I want to live these ideas. And then the life happens and, do you really want to live them? Are you really ready to put your hand in that pocket and pull out what you find in there?
Very often I like to share the idea, this is right out of some behavioral school of psychology or psychotherapy, right? The idea that organisms do not change when they're comfortable. Human beings do not change when we're comfortable, when we're satisfied. And so it takes being uncomfortable, or worse, experiencing suffering, for us to make the changes, to evolve as individuals, as systems, as families, as tribes. And so when you say you want to make changes in your life, be prepared for a little bit of suffering. Be prepared, at the very least, to be uncomfortable.
Was it at the beginning of his logo therapy in a nutshell, the second half of the book? Somewhere he wrote about somebody came to him and said, give me logotherapy, right? In a nutshell, or standing on one foot. And he said, well, I forget how it goes. Do you remember?
I've got it. I've got it right here, because actually, anybody listening to this, pay attention. Dr. Dan is going to do a Instagram post on this very idea here soon. I've got it. A little bit of comedy. But yes, he says, in traditional psychology, the client lays on the couch and talks about their past or their feelings. But in logotherapy, they actually get to sit on the couch and look at the therapist, or something along those lines, right? And he was quite a comedian.
And hear unpleasant things. You don't have to talk about unpleasant things. You just have to hear unpleasant things.
That's right. And that's critical, right? In psychoanalysis, you talk about unpleasant things because you laid on the couch and you just spoke about your past. But in logotherapy, you sat on the couch and the therapist shared with you things that you needed to do and to improve your life.
Yeah, I think of I think every clergy's told this before they leave the seminary. My job is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And I did more of the latter than the former, because I'm an Enneagram 8, and that's what we do.
Okay, but and as an Enneagram 1, and I don't know if that applies, I'm just throwing it out there to be cool, right? But B, you got to break that down. I love that. You've shared that with me before. That's a gem, man. Break that one down again.
We live in a world where we sometimes we think of religion, we think of therapy, we think of spirituality as sweet and soft and gentle and nurturing. And if that's your take, let's say, of religion, you haven't really read the texts, because that's half the equation.
For those of you watching, I can't stop laughing, right? I'm not sure anybody's ever equated me with any of those words you just said. Did you say sweets and what? I've got friends out there that are doubling over right now. Like, what did he just say?
Because we're on the in the Enneagram world, we're in the triad of the instinct, and it's really defined by anger. So 8s and 1s are the angriest ones on the Enneagram. So we're a pain in the ass like that. We should, that's the name of our podcast, maybe.
Dude, there are so many people that know me and enjoy listening to you going, yeah, B, you got it. Preach on.
I want to write a book on called I Kick You in the Nuos, right? Like that's the job to get you going. And half the equation is to challenge, to push back, right? Adam and Eve. Eve is his soulmate, but she's called Ezer Kenegdo. It's translated as helpmate, which is like a ridiculous word. I don't even know what it means. But Ezer means to nurture, to comfort, and Kenegdo means to challenge. So that's a soulmate. A soulmate isn't somebody who says yes. A soulmate is also somebody who says no. And so, can we provide that to the people around us, not just nurturing, but also challenging, right? To afflict when we are comfortable, because comfort is not the place, you said, Dan, of growth, of the noetic. The noetic, the spiritual, for Frankl, has to have tension. The rest of our life, we're seeking a tensionless state. But if we want to grow emotionally, mentally, certainly spiritually, we need the tension. And that's where you and I come in.
Absolutely. It sounds like you've been in my last conversations with my wife. No intention. That's perfect. I love the idea of neodynamics, right? The tension between where we are now and where we need to go, who we want to become, where the noetic, the universe, our life, our wives, God, whatever, where we should be going. That healthy tension. You're so right. And maybe that's the heightened experience of anxiety and depression we see in the past few decades. People seeking comfort while their core being is called to something better, something greater, to grow, to be uncomfortable. Yet we seek this comfort and we don't grow, and it leads us to feel depressed and anxious. Whereas if we embrace the tension, if we choose to grow, to become different, to become better, we become momentarily satisfied until the next opportunity for growth comes up.
A lot of it to me comes down to an arrogance that we have in the West, we have in the modern world, where we think we know. We're so controlling in this day and age. If we can't control everything, your internet sucks right now. I'm just letting you know. If we can't control it, right? Like, I just got to take control of everything. But, we don't control anything. I mean, Frankl talks all about we control nothing except our response to whatever's being presented. And I think about this blessing in the pocket. Frankl could have said, I want to write this manuscript, but that's not what he said. He said, I want to impact people. I want to help people. The universe put in his pocket what he needed, right? Maybe it's not what he wanted. It's what he needed. Can we start to look at the world around us as I'd rather have the manuscript, but all I got is this little piece of paper in my pocket. And maybe I'm being given what I needed, not what I want. There's a lot of frustration in that, but there's some serious growth.
Being given what I needed, not what I want. But in the world of Amazon, I can get whatever I want in 24 hours or less. So why would I wait to be given what I need? Right. And I think that's, I think you and I have done a good job damning our current culture and society pretty well on a weekly basis. But there are things that it's doing to us and corrupting us. We have no patience. We get what we want and don't give ourselves time to recognize what we need?
Time. That's right. We are so rushed. That's anxiety, right? Anxiety is a rushing. There's an intensity. You work with clients, you help bring down their anxiety, catch your breath, get back into your body. In this present moment, are you okay? Almost always somebody's okay right now. Right here, right now. Are you okay? Yes. Well, but I don't know about 2 moments from now. There's no right now. Are you okay? That's all we control. Let's get back into now and just be present. And that is such a lost art in our society because it's just so fast paced. Slow it down. Put your hand in the pocket. You got what you need. Beautiful imagery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that idea of you got what you need. If you make your way to my office and you're sitting in that chair or on that couch, or if an individual makes their way to your virtual office, obviously in that moment, they have what they need. They were able to walk or drive or make transportation or connect to the internet. I mean, we have truly in our Western world, we have so little true problems, especially in the moment. My goodness, with what the world's experiencing right now, I mean, you and I are fortunate and blessed, but also I think we recognize the suffering that's going on and the desire to reach out and help people through it.
It's true. It's everybody's suffering all the time though, right? I mean, maybe, I'm not comparing my suffering to what's going on in Ukraine right now, but as Frankel would talk about, it's your suffering. Like there's no suffering Olympics. You don't get any gold medals. Like it's yours isn't better or worse. It's yours. Mine is mine. And when people come to me, they don't make room for their suffering. There's always this problem because, they're putting it out into the world, into the Ukraine. And it's important to have empathy and tend to them and do what we can. It's also important to tend to your suffering. And I just got off a call with a client who's in grief. And we just had this conversation about a blessing in her pocket. She says, I want my husband back. And of course you do. Absolutely. But are there no blessings? She says, no, there are no blessings. He's gone. And I use this idea of, but we can mitigate some of your suffering by putting your hand in your pocket and finding a blessing. Can we find one blessing in this moment, right here, right now? And we found one and we expanded from it. And by the end of the call, she feels lighter. She feels more inspired. And now she's ready to go back out into the world and help other people with their suffering. And I just think it's so important to tend to our suffering, to find this blessing in our pocket so we can go out and tend to the world's suffering.
Tend to our suffering. I think that's such a powerful idea because too often, in my experience as a substance abuse therapist, but also in other areas of my clinical work, we try to avoid, diminish, alleviate suffering in the quickest way possible, whether that's medication or alcohol abuse or substance abuse or Amazon.com abuse, shopping abuse, gambling, all of these things. They certainly alleviate the momentary suffering. We feel a little bit better. We get that rush of dopamine that triggers our brain to feel good. But guess what? The suffering's still there. We haven't dealt with it. By being in the suffering, by embracing the emotion that we're experiencing, we can, as you did, we can find that blessing in our pocket and then recognize what kind of self-transcendent behavior we can engage in to go help others.
That's a beautiful point. And you're an expert in substance abuse and guiding people through it. I see suffering as the issue, and you just named it. Can you hold suffering? And, the word suffering comes from the Latin pati, which is the same root as patience. It's the same, and in Hebrew, savlanut, which means literally to suffer. Can you hold that suffering? Can you be patient? Can you wait it out as opposed to moving to fix it, like you're talking about, rushing to get rid of it? And that ability to just learn to sit with suffering. As Frankel would say, you don't go searching for suffering, but the life teaches you don't need to go searching. It's going to find you.
Well, I believe he also said it is our duty to, if we can avoid or ameliorate it, to fix it, that we shouldn't. But when we cannot improve upon our suffering, that yes, it is our duty to hold it, to wait for it, to see how it changes us and it shapes us. One of the ways to be better prepared for suffering, to embrace suffering and to be able to hold it, is to practice it. What? Dr. Dan, practice suffering. How do I do that? Well, there's the field of resilience has been gaining a lot of traction in the past decade, right? Training yourself to embrace life's invariable suffering, right? We know the tragic triad, Dr. Frankl's tragic triad: pain, guilt, and death. We will all suffer these throughout life. So we can train ourselves to be prepared for them. We can develop resilience. One easy way that I prescribe often is some form of exercise. Exercise is not comfortable. It's not always fun until you teach yourself it's fun, but we all know it's good for us. We all know that suffering through it helps our quality of life and can improve our health. But I don't think enough of us can do it. So for those of you out there listening to this while you're on your morning jog or run or swim, good for you. Do it a little harder today. Practice a little more. Develop some resilience. Go that extra few steps. Put yourself out of breath so that you're ready for the next round of suffering.
So as long as we're talking about suffering, let's talk about marriage.
Whoa.
There are 3 rings. There are 3 rings in the relationship cycle, right? There's the engagement ring, there's the marriage ring, and there's the suffering.
Suffering. Yes.
So it's actually important because there has to be suffering because of comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And this isn't to beat up on marriage. It's actually to say the opposite. It's the deepest growth opportunity in a human being's life, is to commit to an other and to nurture and to challenge. And so, sometimes when I'm counseling people who are ready to get divorced, and there's a time and place for divorce, I counsel lots of people through it and after it. But sometimes it's about reframing your understanding of what a marriage is about. And if it's just about bliss and honeymoons, right, then you probably have skewed half the equation of a marriage.
Well, if that is your expectation, you obviously did not get premarital counseling from B or Dr. D, right? Because that's, you went into it with a wrong idea that, nobody makes 20 or 30 years of a honeymoon. And any successful marriage will tell you that, yes, it is suffering, but in that suffering, we become better. Ideally, our partner becomes better, and the relationship and those around us become better.
But it comes down to, in some ways, patience, right? Can you be patient? Can you hold the suffering and not run away from it? Or, this is a little stereotypical, but I think stereotypes sometimes have a lot of truth to them. Mm-hmm. Working with men, particularly, everybody in general, but men in particular, your job isn't to fix your spouse's suffering, right? She's not asking you to fix it. She's asking you to hold it. And there's a massive difference. How many conversations have I had with the same damn conversation? And then I'm guilty of doing it myself, where just be present and say, and listen, really listen. Is there anything else? Is there anything else? Is there anything else? And not trying to find resolution. It's so hard sometimes if you have a Y chromosome. It's hard in general. I think it's hard in particular with the Y chromosome.
For those of you listening and have heard me say this, B and I did not talk about this before the podcast, but yes, obviously you're hearing the same thing out of different mouths, because I've had that same conversation. It's not up to us to fix it. There's something in our chromosomes, something in our hunter-gatherer nature over the centuries and millennia that somehow, for some reason, still today, when our wives come to us and say, I've had a really rough day, when the first thing that comes out of your mouth is, well, what you should have done, you can go ahead and stop talking now and duck, because there is something flying at your head, brother.
Yeah, just get the pillow out for the couch, because
Right. You better go out to the barn, the man cave, the basement, the couch, whatever, because or you can try this, gentlemen. I highly recommend this. Wow, I'm sorry. You didn't need me to tell you what to do. You just needed me to listen. Guys, you learn that one thing. Look, I was never good at this early on in my life. I joke about this all the time. I had to go to school to learn that, right? I had to go to school to learn about emotions. And I had to read a lot of books and do these things. So, gentlemen, I get it if you're not good at it. I wasn't either. But short of having to go to school and read textbooks that teach you how to do this, Take B's and my guidance here and learn simply to do this. Gee, honey, that must have been difficult.
Period.
That's it. That's it. And then check it out, guys.
No commas.
Right. No commas, no but, because we know what always follows the but. It's never good. Right. So afterwards, like, okay, use those words. But if you really want to win some points, if you really want to improve your relationship, do this. Be quiet. Make eye contact. That means looking into your partner's eyes, not your phone, iPad, TV, sports game, whatever. Look into her eyes and just nod your head and say, mm-hmm. I'm going to tell you that was 2 weeks of counseling 101, learning how to say, mm-hmm.
It's true. And I would also add to it that it's not just a strategy. It's also a path to growth, because I see myself, I do this in my own life. You know, we teach what we most need to learn. I have 4 kids, 2 of which are teenage girls, and they're always going through drama. And I'm always kind of on the outside. And then I find myself rushing in to fix it. And my daughters look at me like, you're an idiot. Like, there's no point here. There's no solution. We just need to process. But I realize why I do that. I do it because it's scary to me. I feel vulnerable. I want to fix it because I want to protect them. I want to protect myself. But what they're teaching me is how to bring my guard down, be exposed, be vulnerable, and be okay in that. It's not easy for me, but there's a lot of growth for the guys listening who feel like schmucks right now because we just shamed them.
Yes. And for all of you ladies listening who have a male partner, please feel free to share this with them, but don't shame them as B and I just did. We'll call this therapeutic.
Leave that to the professionals.
Right. This is therapeutic shaming. You don't need to do it a little bit extra, right?
We're trained.
So B, what you're saying, right? What you're saying is having teenage daughters does equal suffering. But if we, and I hope. I'm sure both of my daughters may listen to this in time, but girls, I still love you. If we can suffer through that drama with them, if we can hold that space with them, that brings us closer. And that goes for any relationship. I'm going to step outside your Enneagram talk and talk about the Myers-Briggs type indicator, the MBTI, my favorite, right? When we have people with different personality preferences, it's hard to hold that suffering. It is hard to recognize those differences. But if you have the patience, and I use the word grace a lot, if you have the grace to recognize your partner's differences, to accept them and appreciate them, you'll develop that patience. You might even alleviate some of that suffering.
It's beautiful. It's probably a good place to wrap. I would just say, a practical to do. I love creating ritual that speaks to us. And maybe, writing, I'm going to do this, writing a blessing for your pocket, carrying it around, putting your hand in there when you feel like you need a reminder of, find the blessing in this overwhelming storm, the circumstances, whatever your blessing is. He had a particular blessing, but write your blessing. Maybe that's just the word patience. Who knows? That's for you to decide. But to really think about, how can I start to think about, I may not be getting what I want. Well, I feel like I should bust out in a Rolling Stone song, but you get what you need. And in this pocket, right? Here's my blessing in a pocket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we can all relate to that idea of putting on the pair of jeans that maybe we didn't wash in a while, or maybe sitting in the shelf or in the closet, and you put your hand in there, like there's a $5 or $10 bill. I mean, something so small. It's like, oh my goodness, yay! That's an extra cup of coffee today. What we're challenging you to do is to come up with something more substantial. It's not not about money, but what are your blessings? What is that blessing in your pocket that you need when maybe everything feels like it's been stripped away, or when you're going through the depths of suffering? What are those things in your pocket?
What's your North Star that can really orient you, like that woman I counseled, back to her path when it's dark? How do you find your way home? So that's a blessing in the pocket, and comes from a friend of mine who is now a blessing in my life. Thank you.
Awesome. Hey, for those of you that want to find out more about what B and I are up to, you can find me at danielafranz.com. That's DANIELAFRANZ.com. Of course, I'm telling you, there's a pretty good Instagram post coming up next week that was inspired by a good friend of mine. You can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, right? We all have all of those things. Go to the website and take a look. B, where can we find out more about your work and the upcoming Defy Your Enneagram project?
defiantspirit.org or mysoulcenter.org. Either one will get you to me. Or you could just Google Rabbi B, and I would love to hear from you. And I'm just excited to keep the Rabbi B and Dr. D show going.
Absolutely. Can't wait to see what we come up with next.
All right, everybody. Take care. God bless.
Take care.